My book that I'm going to talk about today is kind of an older one. It's Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. And the reason I want to talk about this one is because when I first read this book, I was younger. I want to say I was like 10, maybe 11. And it blew my mind when I read it. I was not that big into reading before this book. I had read books either for school or because people had recommended them, but most of the time they were boring. Or in school, you read a lot of books that are depressing, like they're just not fun. When I read this book,
Pride and
it has.
Prejudice.
Well, I didn't read Pride and Prejudice as a 10-year-old, but there were books we read called Tales of the Fourth Grade Nothing and things like
Yeah,
that. And
Judy Bloom.
well, I didn't care for them, so I didn't get into books because of those ones. I actually got into books because of Island of the Blue Dolphins, and then I guess later Goosebumps like got me really into reading too. So I can remember my entire journey to liking books, and it started here with Island of the Blue Dolphins. And this book is about Karana. That's the name of the main character. She lives with her tribe of people on an island, and it's basically been separated from the rest of humanity, and they're living quiet lives, in kind of modest places. There's very few of them. A ship comes to the island. They've never seen a ship like this before. And the ship is like, we're going to take everybody on this island and we're going to bring them to civilization. And what happens is that Karana and her brother are left behind. They don't get on the ship by accident, basically. And so the rest of her family, her whole tribe, taken from the island. It's now a deserted island. And so her and her brother are going to live here, and they're going to wait until another ship arrives. But then her brother is killed by wolves that are on the island, basically. And so Karana is left by herself. And again, that sounds like a pretty depressing and dark setup, but Karana is very hopeful. She's very, she can't wait to see the boat. She can't wait to see her family again. She just has to basically survive and live on this island until they come back. And everything that she does really just stuck with me. I mean, even as an adult, sometimes I think back on the book and I think, wow, that's a crazy adventure. But she ends up getting some of the wolf cubs and training them. And so they become like her companions. She kind of forgives them for what happened to her brother because she realizes that's just in the nature of wolves that they have to survive too, right? A whale carcass washes up on the island, and she has to do a lot of things to get the pieces. She uses the bones for her home. This was also a book that was fairly educational in terms of things you could do out in the wilderness, and I found that really interesting. You can use whale blubber in all sorts of ways. A 10-year-old Shammy didn't know that. I also didn't know what abalone was, and it's talked about in the book pretty heavily and extensively, and how you can use abalone shells to do all sorts of stuff. You can eat it. A bunch of really interesting things happen, I guess, in terms of like a survival narrative. Additionally, other people come to the island, like poachers and traders, so people who weren't kind, like the first boat. And so Karana has to navigate how to deal with these people, right? So everything about this book was seriously it blew my mind because I had never imagined, 10-year-old Shammy had not imagined what would I do if I was on an island. I mean, I probably would have just died instantly. But after reading this book, I thought, oh, well, maybe I could live, on an island. Or what would I do if I was on an island? And all of the magical things that I could learn about by reading books. I really enjoyed learning in general. You guys had mentioned liking historical fiction. I later got a degree in history because I just
Yeah.
really liked learning, and so after Island of the Blue Dolphins, I was like, wow, like books are cool. So again, it has a very special place in my heart just because of how much it opened my eyes to what books could be. So yeah, if you've never read it, I highly recommend it. It's very short because again, I think it's aimed at like a middle grade or young adults.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a quick read. It does start a little depressing. I mean, I told you most of the depressing things. And I guess the most depressing thing later in the narrative is that the boat doesn't return for a long time. I think 2 decades, So by the time it returns, she's a lot older, but it does return. I mean, spoiler alert. um, but it's very interesting until then, and I loved it. To this day, I sing its praises.
Now that sounds very interesting. I'm pretty sure Farooq will read it. I won't.